Hello and welcome back everybody to another video in a different location for this one because I was asked to post a video about my favorite Japanese sword books, specifically the books. I think maybe I had done this once before, but I don't know if I mentioned all of them, and I just received a new book, so maybe I'll bring that up too. And books are definitely a fantastic resource in collecting that'll save you a lot of money, especially if, like me, you were poor or used to be more poor, because it'll save you from spending money on swords that are pieces of junk because you don't have the money to spend on anything. So, like, well, all right, I might as well get a book. And in a lot of cases, that's a much better investment in your money. Probably true with whatever you're collecting: swords, stamps, coins, cars, whatever. So, I have the bookshelf behind me. This is where I get to put my books. My wife has an extensive space for her stuff, but this is where I get to keep my books, and of course, like hidden away in the basement. But those are more the martial arts books. These are more the sword books, and I'll just go through them like this. I'll pull them out as I find them relevant, and I'll name the key points in them and publisher and where to get them. And I'll try to keep this interesting. All right. So, hey, the first one I came across, this one, Military Swords of Japan by Richard Fuller and Ron Gregory. I remember getting this years and years ago. It's been, it's a little outdated compared to the encyclopedia book by Dawson, but it's still rather interesting. I mean, the pictures are black and white. Dawson's pictures are in color, but it does go through a lot of history, samurai history, like Satsuma Rebellion and the evolution of military swords, and original pictures. I'll hold it up as much as I can, and variations. Some of the descriptions are a tiny bit inaccurate. That's just because years later Dawson was just able to do so much more research on being more specific as to what these models really truly are. Like, these authors thought that the police swords were just higher ranking army officers' swords, but no, they're police swords. But that was cleared up in, like I said, in Dawson's book. And there are some, like I said, there's some original period pictures in here. See? That are very neat. I still recommend picking this book up because I think this book can be had for under $50, and it's still a great resource to have for that much money. I mean, you can't go out to eat fast food for under $50, so it's a good resource, and it gives you pictures of variations too. See, there's variants of swords. Maybe I should hold this up like I'm reading to a kindergarten class. Let's try to do that. Let's just hold it up. Look and see. Kids, see? Look, knives. Every kid's favorite. No, but seriously, this is a really good book, and it does differentiate the difference. Also, these descriptions between Mantetsu, Gendaito, Showato, and it does also give pictures, see, class, and descriptions of the Tang stamps, which I really like. Very informative and pretty accurate too. And in the back, also what I like is, I found this helpful, is it does show you how to tie the sword cord onto the handle and the knot. Especially important for if you want to attempt that. And it has pictures and history of sword surrenders and copies of letters from Japanese officers to the people they surrender their swords to. Some with descriptions here. And again, very informative. And it does have Tang rubbings in the back. I guess more like Tang pictures. But they're descriptive with translations and stamps, and there's all sorts of variations. So again, especially for the money, it's a good book. It's a good read. All right, now on to the next. Let me see, I gotta move some of this stuff around. All right, here's the next one. What I would recommend. It's an oldie but a goodie. Another oldie but goodie. Samurai Sword, a handbook by John Yumoto. There's two covers for this one. There's an older one that's more beige, and then there's this one. This is the, a revised, updated one. And the original one was published in the 50s, so don't get too confused by some of the descriptions of military swords you see in here, because Yamato also says that some of the military swords have, to him anyway, have no value. Maybe that was true in the 50s, or maybe it means like no collectible value as Japanese antiques. But there's certainly value. There's certainly value in military antiques these days. So don't go just throwing them out because you see that there's no value in here. That was for the 50s. So let me see the original date here. Yeah, 1958. So you can't go by that as far as value is concerned. But it does tell the story of how the first Japanese sword maker got to be a sword maker. It's a little bit more of a legend and stuff. And it does give you descriptions of main smiths of the Gokuden, the 5 Japanese swordsmiths traditions, at least for the Koto period. And pictures of a picture of swords that a GI returned home with. So they are out there. And those are all, original swords. It's just a pile of swords that guy returned home with. Types of swords. It does give you classifications of temper lines and ridges, and again tang stamps and what they mean. So this one is very informative, and I like also these. It gives you translations of many characters and what they could mean, their common meanings, their alternative meanings. So I highly recommend picking this book up really just for that. You can go through a lot of the translations on the sword tangs a lot easier with the descriptions of the characters in here. And this book is really not that expensive at all. It's just like the other one. I think I saw it posted for under $50, maybe under $40. So again, money well spent, I think. All right, maybe we'll do a few more in my Japanese to English dictionary, but for this, that's not really, it's not really crucial. All right. I like this one, too. I got this one a few years ago. Japanese Swords, Cultural Icons of a Nation by Colin Rhodes. It does include the DVD. The DVD is really interesting because it does show him going to a store in Japan that sells Japanese swords and shopping around and getting descriptions. And this guy, from what I can see, is very into Kendo, Yado. So he has had experience with swords. The pictures are all in color. The resolution on some of them is held wanting, but the resolution on others is fantastic. Some of these pictures. And it does really show you grain structure. See? And again, in person, held in hand, the images are so much better. So it tells you how to care for your Japanese sword, the etiquette involved, the sword making process, and the sword polishing process, as well as, traditions and legends of Japanese swords and sword use. And I like this too, images of much, much older swords, prior to Heian period, so over 1,000 years ago, that are still left in the Emperor's personal collection. So it's nice to have these pictures because the chances of you holding one in hand are pretty slim. And how mounts of swords have changed over the years. Again, the name of this one, Japanese Swords, Cultural Icons of a Nation. And again, this is another very high resolution photograph. You can clearly see the grain. And it gives you these high resolution photographs also of a culturally important and historically important and, goes without saying, expensive swords and their traditions, their histories. So there's a lot to this book, and it's not crazy expensive. This says $39.95. You could probably get it for around that with the DVD. So again, I think it's a really good deal. Go out and buy it. We'll get to this one. One of my, actually before that, I also have this book, The Japanese Sword, The Soul of the Samurai by Gregory Irvine. And these are pictures from the Victoria and Albert Museum in England. So, London, I believe. If I get that wrong, somebody write it. Let me know, but pretty sure it is. And I like this book because it's very informative, and it's a little book, but it packs a lot in. And I especially like descriptions of the meto. A meto is a sword that's so important. It's like a cultural heritage. It's a valuable cultural object. Like, you can't buy it. They're so important. They're like part of the Japanese cultural identity, and they would never ever sell it. And it gives you really good pictures and descriptions of them. And I like how this book also brings you through the periods and how swords changed and why. So there's a lot of history here as well, and I found it very very informative. So getting to the next one, which is one of my personal favorites, and again is not really crazy expensive. It says $40. You probably get it for around that now or cheaper. Cutting Edge Japanese Swords in the British Museum. Now, I really like this, even though it is heavy on Bizen and Mino tradition swords. Not a lot of other Yamato, Yamashiro, or Sosho in here, although it does have descriptions of Suriagi and Osuriagi Tachi, meaning like cut down and greatly cut down Tachi more towards the beginning of the book. What I really like is that the pictures are all fantastic. They're very well done. And it gives you descriptions in this catalog section of each picture that comes later. So there's these pictures. And as you can see, the pictures are very well done with descriptions. And there's 100 entries here. So there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot to look at. There's a lot to evaluate. You can see every tiny little detail of each one of these blades, and occasionally their mountings, and you get an idea as to how they changed over the years. I think, like, bang for the buck, this is really my favorite, or one of my favorites, this one. So it's definitely worth checking out. And I know I'm flying through these pretty fast. I just have so many, so many sword books, as my wife says. Another sword book? Like, yeah, they're out there. I'll get it. Why not? And I'll go more briefly through these next ones. There is this one. I like this one. Wait, The Art of Japanese Sword Polishing. Never mind the background noise. My dog's going crazy. They heard somebody fart outside, so they're going bananas. But try to keep focusing up here. The Art of Japanese Sword Polishing by Setsuo Takaiwa, Yoshinda Ishihara, and Leon and Hiroko. These people have also worked together on other books that I also like, and I also have. They're very informative. And this details all the steps of how the sword is polished. And I think what this does is it gives you, again, the pictures are fantastic, very high resolution pictures, and it gives you a really thorough appreciation as to the process and how much work, like how much diligence goes into polishing and doing it right, really polishing a Japanese sword, like the traditional way by a trained person. And it gives you also an appreciation as to how hard people who also support the craft have to work, like Shirasaya makers. And it also gives you a better understanding of how swords are supposed to look. After viewing a book like this, if you really read it and you look it over, it makes it a lot easier to spot fakes. Like, you'd be looking at fake swords after this and spot them from a mile away and say, okay, come on, no, clearly, no, that's not, you're not fooling me anymore. And that can also help to save you money. And it also details the difference between the Hadori and Sashikomi finish, and it has interviews with sword polishers and swordsmiths. So again, I think this one, all right, a little higher. It says $45. I think you can get that for around. So, might want to check into that. Oh, we have this one. This one I like because it focuses on the armor and underdressings of armor. So, Samurai Arms, Armor, and Costume by Mitsuo Kure. So, again, this one, I think it has all colored pictures. Yeah, all colored pictures. See? Here's what a lower class samurai would look like, higher class samurai would look like, and the weapons that they would have. Genuine Japanese people in the outfits. That helps, you know. See? Even the way women would be dressed back then. And some of the weapons that they might have. So it's very informative on that, for that point of view. It's not too heavy on weaponry. It's more heavy on costumes, outfits, clothing, and armor. But it's the best resource for that really I've ever seen. So I don't see a price on this. But again, I don't think it's crazy expensive. I think it's worth checking out, and especially if you ever want to get into collecting pieces of armor or full sets of armor or dress from, back in the day, I think this would be an invaluable resource for that. Next, Weapons and Fighting Techniques of the Samurai Warrior by Thomas D. Conlon. This book is really just as it says. It's not really very heavy on like in-depth descriptions of weaponry like the other books I mentioned, or in-depth descriptions of armor like the other books that I mentioned, but it really does go over it's a good overview of history and battles. It does list detailed descriptions of a lot of samurai battles and why these were fought, and history of matchlock muskets in Japanese history and Japanese fighting, and how this impacted sword use and development too. So, I think it's valuable for that. Let me see if I can find a price on this one. Yeah, sorry. No price listed that I could see. But it can't be, again, I don't think it's that crazy expensive. What is kind of crazy expensive, not really crazy expensive, but it can get expensive, is this one. A Connoisseur's Book of Japanese Swords by Koka Nagayama. Yeah. This one is a little bit more expensive, but extremely thorough. And it really does go over a lot of descriptions of sword periods and how styles changed with certain smiths and schools within swords periods and traditions. And I mean, it means what it says, a Connoisseur's Book of Japanese Swords. You might want to have a few swords and a little bit of collecting time under your belt before you buy this, unless you're collecting from pictures, which is fine. I thought about doing that too. But like I said, I think I said this in a previous video, if you can afford to be a connoisseur of antique, real Japanese swords, hey, congratulations, more power to you. That would be like if you could afford to be a connoisseur of Ferraris, then go for it. But I don't think that's going to be me. And this book is, for me, the Bible for Japanese military swords, at least until there's a revision, which I haven't heard about because I buy that too. This book is not cheap. This was like double the price of the other ones at least, but you know what? It's money well spent. Swords of Imperial Japan, Encyclopedia Edition by Jim Dawson. This is the book I was referring to earlier. All the pictures are in color. It gives an exhaustive, extensive detail and history of, military sword development, and it's chock full of many, many examples, and they're just fantastic. And I'm very jealous of whoever this Michael Quigley person is, because he owns all of the things in here. Most. Maybe he sold them or whatever by now, but I don't know who he is, but this guy owned everything. And more power to him. That's great. I'm just, admittedly, I'm jealous. And if you have a Japanese military sword out there, like over 100% sure you could find it in here. It has everything, even sword pistols. Look at that. I recommend firing one of those, but it is very interesting. This is one of the first sword books I got to. I'm not sure if it's in print. See, it's a little worn out. I bring this on vacations and stuff as a kid. Yeah, it was really exciting. But now, Arms and Armor of the Samurai by Ian Bottomley and A.P. Hobson. And I don't know if they're still with us. This book is rather old, like I said, but it was one of my first forays into traditional Japanese swords and armor and, the way of the bow and pictures of genuine antique swords and the way they should look. And like I said, it's a good resource, and I don't think it's crazy expensive if you can find it. And then there's this book, again, which was not cheap, but I had to have it. And because the pictures are fantastic. They're, like I said before, this about the resolution. This is true of this book too. Very high resolution. Art of the Samurai, Japanese Arms and Armor. And this is the book, I think, produced by the Metropolitan Museum of the display that they had. I forget what they call it. The exhibit that they had on Japanese arms and armor. And there's this book, the earlier part, the front part of the book is more swords. The latter part of the book is more armor. But the pictures are fantastic, as are the descriptions. As you can see from this picture, it gives you history of sword development through shape and size, which is important to see too, because if you have an antique sword, you might be able to further narrow down the era it came from. If it didn't come with papers, if it comes with papers, it's going to tell you that. But if it doesn't, get a better idea as to when it could have been made just by referring to books such as this. So, moving on from this book, I like how it gives you descriptions of the armor and the famous figure that could have worn the armor. So you get a really good idea as to how this would have looked on the battlefield hundreds of years ago. Let's see. Another one. All right. Samurai Swords. A Collector's Guide to Japanese Swords by Clive Sinclair. If memory serves me correct, I think he was president of the Token Society of Great Britain. So this is a guy who knows a lot about Japanese swords. Obviously, he wrote a book. I think what he goes over in here is his fondness. I think this is the book for Hizento. Hizen blades are, they're usually characterized by a medium Sugaha temper line, medium to narrow to medium, I think. And yeah, historical background of Hizento. These are pictures of Hizento blades. Again, I forget what tradition they more or less fit into, but they're usually very well done, very fine, tight grain. Again, I can't mention all of the detail here in this one video. That's in these books. It pays to just get and read the books. And again, this is another one, not crazy expensive. I forget the price on this, but I think maybe around $40, $50. Check it out. I think it's worth checking out. So I do have other ones that I'll have to mention in later videos. Those were just my favorites. But yes, there's more. Maybe in another video I'll go over more, or if people want, I can talk about or show more of what's in one book. But there's no substitution for just getting the book. It's worth it to just go out and get it. All right, well, that's all I can think of for now as far as the books. But I'll post another video soon on showing sword tangs and how they, change throughout the eras and what Tsurayage looks like versus Osuriage. And hopefully that'll be informative and interesting. I'll try to keep that interesting too. Okay. Well, bye everybody, and have a great time.